The Disturbing Facts, Theories and Things Iceberg was uploaded on Reddit last year by a user who has since deleted their account, so unfortunately I can't credit them. Anyway, it's a pretty random collection of unsettling phenomena, including deaths, criminals, illnesses, philosophical concepts, conspiracy theories, and everything in between. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to gain access to uncut videos and other perks, or you can leave me a tip by clicking the thanks under this video. Thanks to anyone who considers this. This video will cover a range of potentially triggering topics, including death, disappearances, and inappropriate activity with children. Viewer discretion is advised. You can click the link in the description to watch a longer, uncut and ad-free version of this video, which includes a few extra entries that were unsuitable for this cut. In religion and folklore, hell is thought to be a spiritual realm or state of being where souls are punished after death for a person's sins during life. It's the opposite of heaven, a place of misery, suffering, and torture. The estimated duration of hell for an individual varies in different religions. For example, some Christians believe that hell is a place of eternal torment, whereas some Hindus and Buddhists believe that hell is a temporary phase between reincarnation cycles. If you haven't thought too much about it before, the size of the universe might not sound like an entry worthy of being on a Disturbing Things iceberg, but if you're prone to existential dread, you'll absolutely understand why it's on here. The observable universe is estimated to be about 93 billion light-years in diameter, which is pretty much incomprehensible. To attempt to put that into perspective, a light year is the distance a beam of light travels in 1 year, which is almost 6 trillion miles. So imagine 6 trillion times by 93 billion, and you have the estimated diameter of the universe in miles. That's just an estimate though. In reality, no one really knows the size of the universe. It could even be infinite. This is disturbing when you think about it because it really highlights how insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things. The vast majority of us live and die having made no significant impact on Earth, but no matter how well known or influential you become on Earth, none of it really matters in the context of the universe as a whole. I'm not trying to induce depression in anyone here. You absolutely can and will make an impact on your loved ones and your community, and I think that's good enough. But the vastness of the universe is a good reason to not take life too seriously. Another concerning thought related to the size of the universe is whether or not we are the only life in it. It makes sense, given the size, that somewhere there must be some kind of life, but we haven't yet encountered it, and who knows if we ever will. I'm honestly not sure which is more terrifying, that there is life out there, and we don't know what it's like, or if it's friendly, or that we're totally alone. Paranormal activity can be described as events or beings outside scientific understanding, usually ghosts and aliens, as well as phenomena such as telekinesis and clairvoyance. As someone who is skeptical of anything not supported by scientific evidence, I don't actively believe in ghosts or anything paranormal, with the exception of aliens perhaps, though I don't believe we've ever encountered them. There are countless people who claim to have had paranormal experiences, but I personally believe there is a rational explanation behind them. Our eyes can deceive us and our brains like to play tricks on us. Our senses are much less reliable than we like to believe, and not everything is as it seems. That said, most paranormal phenomena as a concept is unfalsifiable. While individual encounters can often be debunked, it's impossible to definitively prove that, say, ghosts in general don't exist, no matter how small the likelihood is. People have been experiencing paranormal phenomena for thousands of years, and regardless of the true explanation, it's still disturbing. Whether it really is ghosts or hallucinations, it still feels very real to those witnessing it, and that must be terrifying. Cancer is a group of diseases characterized by abnormal cell growth that can spread to other parts of the body. Cancer is a leading cause of death worldwide and accounts for nearly 1 in 6 deaths in total, which is a pretty disturbing fact in itself. But what I find more disturbing is just how many things can increase your risk of developing cancer. There are the obvious ones like smoking and alcohol, but then there is a seemingly endless list of things we all encounter in everyday life that's almost impossible to avoid, from UV radiation from the sun to traffic emissions. Then there are things people commonly do that they might not even know increase the risk of cancer, such as consuming burnt food and hot liquids. It's terrifying to think that no matter what you do, you can't totally avoid all carcinogens. But the good news is that due to better screening and more treatment options, the cancer mortality rate is declining. In the US, the 5-year survival rate for all cancers combined was 69% for people diagnosed in 2014. Several cancers, including breast, prostate, and testicular, now have a 5-year survival rate of over 90%, and we can expect death rates to continue decreasing. Schizophrenia is a long-term mental health condition that causes a range of psychological symptoms, including visual and auditory hallucinations and delusions. The exact cause is not known for sure, but it's thought to be a combination of genetic and environmental factors. These may include childhood trauma, use of psychoactive drugs, pregnancy and birth complications, and differences in brain development. It's important to note that most people with schizophrenia are not violent and are not a risk to anyone else, but it can be a very difficult and scary condition for the person affected by it. There are treatments though, like antipsychotic medication and therapy, and if the condition is managed, it's possible to reduce the chance of severe relapses. Jeffrey Epstein is one of the most disturbing entries on this iceberg. I'm sure you're at least somewhat familiar with him, but allow me to briefly summarize. He was a financier who was known for associating with countless celebrities, politicians, and other prominent figures. He was first arrested in 2005 after being accused of paying a 14-year-old girl for inappropriate contact. Dozens of other underage girls accused him of similar things, but he was eventually allowed to plead guilty to a charge involving just one of these victims, resulting in him serving 13 months in a jail work release program. He was arrested again in July 2019 on federal charges for trafficking minors, and just over a month later, he was found dead in his jail cell. It was determined that he took his own life, though many don't believe this ruling. There are various other conspiracy theories related to Jeffrey Epstein, including who was on his alleged client list, but I'll avoid getting into that here. Some estimate that he may have had over 1,000 victims, though the exact number isn't known for sure. If you're a similar age to me or younger, you probably grew up with some sense of impending doom due to the effects of climate change. For as long as I can remember, we were warned in school, in the news, in documentaries, that the world as we know it will change forever due to climate change, and not in a good way. We can already see these effects happening now, such as loss of sea ice, melting glaciers and ice sheets, rise in sea level and more intense heat waves, and things are only going to get worse, and possibly irreversible. According to the International Environment Forum, quote, "A major study warns that even temporarily exceeding the 1.5 degrees C global warming limit could lead to irreversible consequences, including rising sea levels and mass biodiversity loss. The paper shows overshooting could trigger the thawing of permafrost, releasing vast amounts of greenhouse gases that would further accelerate climate change. Additionally, the research points to extreme heat waves that could result in excess deaths, especially in vulnerable communities. Each fraction of a degree above 1.5 degrees C increases the risk of triggering climate tipping points, such as the collapse of the Amazon rainforest or the complete destruction of coral reefs. Beyond physical climate changes, overshoot also poses a severe threat to biodiversity. The 2024 WWF Living Planet report revealed an alarming 73% decrease in wildlife populations over the past 50 years. While climate change is one of humanity's biggest threats, the possibility of nuclear war is arguably even worse. Here are some excerpts from an article on The Guardian explaining why. As you read this, about 4,000 nuclear weapons are poised for a first strike across the Northern Hemisphere, enough atomic firepower to kill as many as 700 million people from blasts and burning alone. And that is just the start. The explosions and fires, like nothing seen on Earth since the comet strike that led to the Cretaceous mass extinction, would loft enough soot into the stratosphere to cast an impenetrable shadow over the globe. No light means no photosynthesis, the basis of planetary food webs. No heat means that the surface of the Earth would plunge into an icy, years-long winter. There's no adaptation options for nuclear war, Mark Linus said. Nuclear winter will kill virtually the entire human population, and there's nothing you can do to prepare, and there's nothing you can do to adapt when it happens, because it happens over the space of hours. It is a vastly more catastrophic existential risk than climate change. There's never another harvest for humanity. The food will never grow again, because by the time the sun comes back out and temperatures rise again, within a decade or so, everyone's dead. Selling your soul is a saying that basically means doing something bad or dishonest to gain money, success, or power. I guess this entry might be referring to various conspiracy theories involving celebrities selling their souls. This can either be literally, for example, some people believe that The Weeknd literally sold his soul to the devil a few years ago in exchange for more success in his career. This was supposedly hinted at through various vague satanic references in his music videos and at concerts, such as at one concert when the numbers 666 reportedly flashed on the screen. It can also be metaphorically though. For example, it has been theorized that Kris Jenner leaked her daughter Kim Kardashian's not safe for work tape. If true, she didn't literally sell her soul, but she did sacrifice her morals for fame. These conspiracy theories usually don't have any solid evidence behind them and are often related to other Illuminati conspiracies. The Mandela effect is a phenomenon where many people remember an event, product, photo, or word different to what it actually is. The term was coined in 2009 by Fiona Broom, who believed that Nelson Mandela had died in prison in the 1980s, when in actuality he died in 2013. She found that many other people also remembered the same as her, and from then there have been countless other examples. Some of the craziest ones for me personally are Looney Tunes, not Looney Tunes, the fact that there was no "Hello Clarice" line in The Silence of the Lambs, and the Monopoly man not having a monocle. Some believe that the Mandela effect is evidence of parallel universes, but a more grounded explanation is false memories, which is still pretty scary considering how many unrelated people around the world have experienced this. It's estimated that more than 80% of the ocean is unexplored, which is pretty crazy considering humans have been to the moon and sent rovers to Mars, yet we haven't explored so much of our own planet. The ocean covers about 71% of Earth's surface, and when you go deep enough, it's in total darkness and under extreme pressure, making it very difficult for humans to explore. It has been suggested that more than 90% of the ocean's species are still undiscovered though, and it's interesting to think what might be down there. I know it's highly unlikely, but I went down the megalodon rabbit hole a while ago and I like to think it still exists out there somewhere. Maybe it evolved to survive deeper in the sea. In 2014, a 9-foot great white shark was tagged with a tracking device that revealed it was pulled down nearly 2,000 feet. Then there was a temperature spike which suggested it had been eaten by something much larger, possibly an orca, or even a megalodon. Either way, this story goes to show that we already have knowledge of terrifying creatures in the ocean, so I dread to think what else is out there that we haven't discovered yet. The world is full of strange coincidences. Let's take a look at a few of the most unbelievable ones. In July 1975, 17-year-old Erskine Ebbin was killed when a taxi knocked him off his moped in Hamilton, Bermuda. The coincidence, that almost sounds like fiction, is that his brother had died on the same street in the same way a year prior. He was also 17 and had been driving the exact same moped when he was hit by a taxi, which turned out to be the same taxi, with the same driver, carrying the same passenger. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a novel in which a man named Richard Parker survived a shipwreck with 3 other people who eventually decided to eat him to avoid starvation. 46 years later, in real life, a ship sank and there were 4 survivors. One of them was named Richard Parker, and just like in the novel, he was cannibalized by the other 3 survivors. In 1979, 2 twins who had been separated at 4 weeks old reunited at the age of 39. Turns out they had both been named Jim by their adoptive parents, both enjoyed maths and carpentry and had careers in security. Both had previously married women named Linda before divorcing and remarrying women named Betty, and they both had sons named James Allen. I also have a personal coincidence which isn't as crazy as the other ones I just mentioned, but it did feel wild to me at the time. Last year I was in Amsterdam with a friend. We were walking through the city and ended up chatting with this American couple. After a few minutes we had to leave, so we all followed each other on Instagram. We noticed that me and the woman had one mutual, and turns out she was friends with someone I'd met in Los Angeles the year prior. Bear in mind, I'm from England, she's from America, and we randomly met in the Netherlands. Out of everyone we could have randomly encountered, what are the chances that it ends up being a friend of someone I'd met in a totally different continent? I find weird coincidences fascinating, so if anyone has any more, then please let me know in the comments. The rise of AI, particularly how rapidly it's advancing, has led many to fear that there will be some kind of AI apocalypse. This may involve the replacement of the entire human workforce, which we're already seeing happen now. There are many tasks that once required a human employee that can now be done by easily accessible AI apps, from translation to web development. Another apocalyptic possibility is that AI takes over and ends up eradicating us all. This could be an unintended consequence of what AI is programmed to do. For example, if you told a robot to farm as many potatoes as possible, who knows what lengths it will go to make that happen. Perhaps it'll kill the owner of a nearby farm to take their potatoes, or maybe it'll kill everyone in the world so there's no one to consume the potatoes and reduce the amount. At this point, I think some kind of AI takeover is inevitable. There's no way we'd voluntarily go back to a life without ChatGPT or other AI tools, so I guess we can only hope that the ramifications aren't too dire. The Fermi paradox basically questions, where are the aliens? It makes sense that intelligent life exists outside of Earth due to the vastness of the universe, but then why don't we have any observable evidence of such life? Personally, I think the Fermi paradox answers its own question. We haven't encountered aliens because the universe is incomprehensibly huge. We may have sent spacecrafts to every planet in our solar system, but there are billions, potentially trillions of other planetary systems out there. Humans have explored a minuscule part of the universe, so why would we assume that another intelligent life form would have explored so much more, enough to find us? According to Wikipedia, Operation Northwoods was, quote, a proposed flag operation which originated within the Department of Defense of the United States government in 1962. The proposals called for Central Intelligence Agency operatives to both stage and commit acts of terrorism against American military and civilian targets, blame them on the Cuban government, and use them to justify a war with Cuba. The possibilities detailed in the document included the remote control of a civilian aircraft, which would be secretly repainted as US Air Force planes, a fabricated shoot-down of a US Air Force fighter aircraft off the coast of Cuba, the possible assassination of Cuban immigrants, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, blowing up a US ship, and orchestrating terrorism in US cities. The proposals were rejected by President John F. Kennedy. The 27 Club refers to a list of celebrities who died at the age of 27, including Jimi Hendrix, Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain, Brian Jones, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison. There is an urban legend based on the 27 Club that many of the celebrities that died at 27 were in possession of a white cigarette lighter at the time. However, this has been disproven, as disposable lighters were not widely available at the time many of these celebrities died. It's an urban myth that celebrity deaths are more common at 27, and the perceived significance of this age can be explained in a couple of ways. While 27 is a relatively young age to die, many of these celebrities were known for their high-risk lifestyles. The claim that more celebrities die at 27 has been refuted by statistical research, and it seems that the list has been cherry-picked. You could probably pick any other age and make a similar list. For example, Heath Ledger, Avicii, Brandon Lee, and various other celebrities died at the age of 28. As I mentioned in an earlier entry, around 80% of the ocean hasn't been explored, and more than 90% of the ocean species may yet to be discovered. But we are aware of many deep-sea creatures, and some of them are pretty disturbing. Take the anglerfish, for example. As you can see from the photo on screen now, it looks absolutely terrifying. While males are often just a few centimeters long, females can grow up to 1.2 meters in size. They use a bioluminescent rod on their heads to lure in prey. Male black devil anglerfish are particularly scary. When they find a female, they latch onto her and fuse with her body for life, meaning they never let go. They do this by biting her, which releases enzymes to dissolve the tissue around the wound, fusing them and even allowing them to share a common bloodstream. The cosmic calendar was developed by Carl Sagan to visualize the 13.8 billion year history of the universe by compressing it into 1 year. In the calendar, the Big Bang happens at midnight on the 1st of January, the Milky Way formation is in mid-May, Sun and Earth formation in mid-September, extinction of dinosaurs is on the 30th of December, and human history only occupies the last few seconds of the final minute of the 31st of December. This really puts into perspective how little time humans have existed and how much happened before us. For this entry, photos taken right before death, I'm just going to show you a selection of photos with a brief description. In 1995, stuntman Robert Overacker was trying to raise awareness for the homeless through a stunt where he would jet ski at Niagara Falls and then parachute down after launching off. His parachute failed to open and he fell to his death. This photo shows Casey Rivera helping a family of ducks cross the road in May 2023. Just moments later, he was fatally hit by a car. On the 26th of December 2004, a tsunami struck various Southeast Asian countries, killing around 230,000 people, one of whom was 31-year-old Deborah Garlick, who had been on holiday in Thailand. Her camera was later found, and this is thought to be the last photo of her. The patient in the hospital bed in this photo was 22-year-old Mayinga Naseka, a nurse who was caring for patients during the 1976 Ebola epidemic in Zaire. There were 318 cases in that outbreak, which had an 88% mortality rate, and sadly, Mayinga succumbed to the disease on the 19th of October 1976. On the 1st of January 2011, Rinaldo Dagsa, a Filipino politician, took this photo of his family, not noticing the man right behind his daughter pointing a gun at him. He was shot and rushed to hospital, but doctors weren't able to save him. On the 31st of October 2015, Olga Sheena posted this photo online, showing her husband and daughter about to board Metrojet Flight 9268 with the caption, "We're going home." Shortly after takeoff, the plane exploded and disintegrated, killing all 224 passengers and crew members. The top 1% of Americans have significantly more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. Some reports even show that the top 1% holds 16 times or even more net worth than the bottom 50%. This divide between the wealthiest and those with less wealth has widened over the last few decades and may well continue to rise. Spontaneous combustion is when an object with a relatively low ignition temperature, such as straw or coal, begins to release heat, for example due to oxidation or bacterial fermentation, and so it eventually sets on fire. A more disturbing version of this, though, is spontaneous human combustion, where a living or recently deceased human body sets on fire without an obvious cause. One example was a British woman named Jeanne Safin, who died in September 1982 at the age of 61. She was in her family's kitchen with her father Jack. He was looking away from her, then his attention was drawn back to her as she suddenly set on fire. He and his son-in-law extinguished the fire with water from the sink, then called an ambulance. Jeanne was taken to the hospital but died 8 days later from bronchopneumonia due to burns. Her family described flames coming from her mouth as she made roaring noises like a dragon, but they claimed to have no idea how she caught fire because there was no source of ignition in the kitchen except the pilot light on the gas stove. However, after extensive research into cases of spontaneous human combustion, the scientific consensus is that it is implausible and that incidents that appear to be spontaneous did in fact involve an external source of ignition. In the case of Jeanne, it was suggested that her father had knocked out used tobacco from his pipe to refill it, and that caused lit embers to land on Jeanne's flammable nylon clothing, which ended up catching fire. The butterfly effect is the idea that a tiny change in the initial conditions of a complex system can lead to large, unpredictable, and vastly different outcomes later on. There are various fascinating examples throughout history. One is Hitler being rejected from art school. It's possible, even probable, that the Holocaust would never have happened if he had been accepted. Another example is that both Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg were supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, the plane that was hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center on 9/11. But Seth missed the flight after arriving late to the airport because he was hungover, and Mark had a last-minute change of plans and decided to fly to Toronto for a film festival instead. There are various similar stories from others who avoided the incident because they slept in or had some other problem that made them late to work that day. And this is good to remember if you're ever running late. It might seem frustrating at the time, but you don't know what may have happened if you were on time. Around 600,000 people are reported missing in the US every year, which is a terrifying statistic. Thankfully, many of these cases are resolved within 30 days, but some people are never found again. There are also 4,400 unidentified bodies discovered every year. Statistics show that people of colour make up a disproportionately high percentage of missing person reports, particularly children. In July 2025, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System reported that there were 25,693 open missing persons cases and 15,470 open unidentified cases. In the last 100 years or so, significant social progress has been made in terms of human rights, equality, healthcare and education. The global life expectancy has more than doubled from 32 years in 1900 to 71 years by 2021. Women's rights have increased significantly, as just over 100 years ago they weren't even allowed to vote in the US and UK. Homosexuality was only decriminalised by the Supreme Court in the US in 2003, overturning laws in various states including Alabama, Florida and Michigan. The civil rights movement, which aimed to abolish legalized racial segregation, discrimination, and disenfranchisement in the US, began just over 70 years ago. Access to education has improved significantly, with many countries expanding compulsory education, increasing public investment, and technological advancement has also made learning easier and more enjoyable. It's undoubtable that for almost everyone, life in 2025 is significantly better than it would have been in 1925. However, in recent times, the rate of social progress has slowed and even declined in some areas. The cost of living crisis has left many struggling to pay bills and even afford food, let alone think about buying a home. Even in countries like the UK with free healthcare, COVID and other factors have resulted in less access to healthcare, with long waiting lists leading to preventable deaths. The current political climate in many countries threatens the rights of marginalised communities, and the ongoing possibility of war is creating more and more instability. Social progress isn't a linear process and can be seen more as a pendulum swinging. Periods of advancement are followed by periods of decline. Wikipedia has multiple pages on lists of unusual deaths in different time periods. Let's take a look at some from the 21st century. Jane McDonald. While visiting a friend, the 31-year-old slipped and fell onto an open dishwasher, landing on an upright knife. She was taken to a hospital where she died of her injuries. A 45-year-old Taiwanese woman bathed in 40.5% ethanol in an attempt to protect herself from SARS during the 2002 to 2004 SARS outbreak. She lay down in the fluid at 11 p.m. and was found dead at 11 a.m. by her family the next day. Her blood alcohol content was 1.35%, and she most likely absorbed the alcohol through her skin. Diane Joe. The 49-year-old was killed in North Platte, Nebraska, by a falling Taco Bell sign. The sign was knocked over by high winds and landed on a pickup truck, killing her and injuring her husband Mark. Taylor Mitchell. The 19-year-old Canadian folk singer was killed by a pair of coyotes while hiking in Cape Breton Highlands National Park, in the only known fatal coyote attack on an adult. Jimmy Hesselden. The 62-year-old owner of Segway Inc. died after apparently riding a Segway personal transport system off a cliff in Thorpe Arch, England. The coroner came to the conclusion that Hesselden had likely fallen from the cliff with the Segway after getting into difficulty, reversing to allow a man walking his dog to pass him. James Campbell. The 68-year-old man from Cantonment, Florida, had left his 1995 Chevrolet van to open a gate from his driveway when his dog stepped on the van's gas pedal and ran him over. Denver Lee St. Clair. The 58-year-old was asphyxiated by an atomic wedgie administered by his stepson Brad Davis during a fight in Oklahoma. After he had been knocked unconscious, the elastic band from his underwear was pulled over his head and stretched around his neck, strangling him. Davis was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Ravi Subramanian. The 54-year-old Air India technician was sucked into an aircraft's jet engine when it was started prematurely by the plane's co-pilot. Atif Rakif. The 24-year-old died from cardiac arrest in a movie theatre in Birmingham, England, while looking for his dropped mobile phone. His head became wedged under the electronic footrest of a seat. Public surveys have suggested that over a quarter of Americans believe that Big Pharma is definitely suppressing a cure for cancer, and a further 1 in 7 think it's possible. This is a conspiracy theory that suggests pharmaceutical companies make more money from treating cancer than they would if they released a cure, so it's in their best interest to conceal it. There is no evidence for this theory though. A number of snake oil salesmen online claim to have cured their own or other people's cancer with a variety of treatments, such as homeopathy or specific diets, but there is no evidence any of these work. Relying on these alternative treatments instead of science-based medicine is very dangerous and has led to countless preventable deaths. One example is 23-year-old Paloma Shemirani, who died in 2024 from a heart attack caused by an untreated cancerous tumor in her chest. She'd refused chemotherapy, reportedly due to her mother's conspiratorial influence. This entry is: you are 800 times more likely to die in a car crash than a plane crash. This isn't true. 800 is way too high a multiplier. In fact, it'd be pretty difficult to determine the exact figure, since it would depend on a number of factors. Are you comparing one single car journey with one flight, or the time travelled, or the distance? Anyway, it is true that air travel is statistically much safer than driving though, and you are more likely to die in a car crash than in a plane crash, just not 800 times more likely. We are closer to 2050 than 1990. I guess that's a sobering reminder of how quickly time passes. I didn't exist in 1990, so this doesn't hit the same for me as it probably would my parents, but to think that we're halfway between 2010 and 2040 is crazy to me. The Georgia Guidestones was a granite monument in Georgia, US that was built in 1980 by a group of people who believed there was going to be an upcoming social, nuclear, or economic calamity. They intended the monument to be a guide for humanity after the predicted event. Although the creators claimed to have built it as some kind of Christian structure, there were various conspiracy theories claiming it was connected to Satanism. On the 6th of July 2022, a vandal bombed the Guidestones, heavily damaging them, resulting in the remains being cleared by local officials. In 2008, CERN launched the Large Hadron Collider, the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator. The following year, Fiona Broome discovered the Mandela effect. Coincidence? Not according to this theory that suggests that CERN actually caused the Mandela effect. My understanding of physics is too limited to make much sense of this theory, if there even is any sense to it, so I'd recommend researching it yourself if you're interested. But in a nutshell, it's suggested that every time CERN runs the Large Hadron Collider, it transfers pieces of information from this universe into another parallel universe, which is what causes the changes people associate with the Mandela effect. Larry Silverstein was the developer who signed a 99-year lease for the World Trade Center just 6 weeks before 9/11. After the incident, he received millions of dollars in insurance payouts and also pursued lawsuits against airlines and airport security companies. Larry had a breakfast meeting every morning at the World Trade Center, though on the day of the attacks he didn't go because his wife made a dermatology appointment for him. Naturally, this has resulted in conspiracy theories suggesting he had something to do with the incident, or that he at least had prior knowledge, though there's no evidence to prove that. I'm going to be vague about this next one because it is an ongoing situation, and honestly I don't want to risk getting a strike against my channel, but I'm sure you can join the dots. It's a conspiracy theory that a certain country had knowledge of something that happened a couple of years ago, and their failure to prevent it was not due to incompetence, but so they'd have an excuse to escalate the situation. I guess this entry, Alternative Timelines of History, is referring to hypothetical scenarios where a major historical event happened differently. For example, what would happen if Germany won World War II, or what if COVID never happened? There's actually a whole subreddit dedicated to this named History What If. It's definitely worth checking out if you're interested in this. One of the posts on there questions what if instead of the space race in the 50s, it was the deep sea race? One user said that orbital satellites would have come later, so no GPS, no satellite telecommunications, no weather satellites, etc. But there would be more mining operations on and beneath the ocean floor, greater knowledge of deep sea life, and greater harnessing of geothermal energy. Another post asked, if nuclear weapons didn't exist, would World War III and World War IV have already happened? The general consensus was yes, at least World War III, because there would be no deterrent in the form of mutually assured destruction. Shortly after 9/11, there were some reports of unusual trading activity prior to the event, particularly in the stock of airline companies, leading some to believe that some individuals had prior knowledge of the attacks. However, the Commission report concluded that extensive investigations found no evidence of insider trading related to the incident. This entry is, no shortage of predators for to catch a predator and other sting operations. I guess it's referring to how common P-files seem to be. We all like to think that they make up a small percentage of the population, but in reality it's likely much higher. There are plenty of them on to catch a predator, but many more get exposed online in sting operations every day, but the majority of them probably don't ever get caught, particularly when you consider that not all of them actually interact with children and instead just stick to consuming illegal content. Stanley Meyers was known for claiming to have created a water fuel cell that could power a car instead of gasoline. He appeared in a news report on TV with a dune buggy that he claimed was powered by his water fuel cell. He said that it could travel from Los Angeles to New York using only 83 litres of water. He patented the design and sold dealerships to 2 investors, giving them the right to do business in water fuel cell technology. However, they sued him in 1996 due to concerns that the cell didn't work. In court, 3 experts examined the cell and determined there was, quote, nothing revolutionary about the cell at all, and that it was simply using conventional electrolysis. The court found Stanley had committed gross and egregious fraud, and he was ordered to repay the 2 investors their $25,000. On the 20th of March 1998, Stanley was at a restaurant for a meeting with 2 investors when he reportedly ran outside shouting, "They poisoned me." He died soon after at the age of 57. The coroner ruled that his death was due to a cerebral aneurysm, however some believe that he was actually assassinated to suppress his inventions. One of the investors who had been with Stanley when he died disputed these rumours, highlighting that he had been financially supporting him for years and even considered him a friend. Stanley's patents have since expired and his designs are now publicly available, yet no vehicle manufacturers use them, further suggesting that his inventions were based on nothing more than pseudoscience. Solipsism is the philosophical theory that nothing exists outside of one's own mind. Metaphysical solipsism is the most extreme type of this, suggesting that the world and everything in it is only part of one's own consciousness, and you can't prove that anything actually exists. Epistemological solipsism suggests that an external world might exist, but it's impossible to know anything for certain about it. It's estimated that nearly 20% of Americans are allergic to nickel, which is unfortunate given that the metal is commonly found in many everyday items. Nickel jewellery can be avoided pretty easily, but nickel is also found in electronics like phones, laptops and smartwatches, and appliances and kitchenwares like toasters and kitchen sinks. It can even be found in some detergents, cosmetics and foods, and even trace amounts can cause a reaction in some people. There is a theory that schools are intentionally misdiagnosing children with learning difficulties to receive extra funding for special education needs, or SEN. These difficulties may include dyslexia and ADHD, and children experiencing them often require extra support, hence schools receive additional funding for SEN pupils. While it's true that diagnoses of conditions like ADHD have significantly increased globally in the last decade, this is likely due to increased awareness and improved diagnostic methods, not because schools are falsely diagnosing children. Some believe that God is real and that he created the universe and everything in it, but that he doesn't care about Earth or humans. I don't actively believe in God, but if God did exist in the way that most religions claim, I'd find it hard to argue against this theory. There is so much suffering in the world, from humans doing awful things to other humans, to natural disasters, to devastating illnesses. If God had the power to stop this yet chose not to, how can we believe he cares? Some think life is a test and that those who do bad things will be punished in the afterlife, but not everyone even gets a test. What about babies who die hours after they're born? They never even developed enough to make conscious decisions. Furthermore, we all get dealt a different hand in life, so if it is a test, it certainly isn't a fair one. Someone born in the poorest country without enough food will never have the same opportunities and will inevitably have a harder test than someone born into a rich family in the US. In 2020, a 4chan user claiming to be a former employee of Jeffrey Epstein made a thread to detail his experiences working for him. At first he was just doing odd jobs at one of Jeffrey's houses, mowing the lawn, cleaning, etc. Then he wasn't needed for a while, so instead his manager referred him to do some work for the Romney family, as in Mitt Romney, the recently retired politician. Opie wasn't working for Mitt though, he was tasked with being a driver for a 22-year-old man named Cole, who Opie described as a total POS. One morning, after Opie had driven Cole home with a woman, Cole came outside to tell Opie there was a problem. He went inside and found the woman from last night dead from an apparent OD. Cole instructed Opie to drive her body to a remote location where he'd meet with some other people who would handle it, so he did. Sometime after, he eventually went back to working for Jeffrey Epstein, this time on his island. He described a number of awful events, such as a 14-year-old boy running out and asking him for help before being escorted back into the room to continue doing God knows what. Another time, he and two of his colleagues ended up killing a young man who was also working there and had been caught with a phone. Eventually, Opie stopped posting after stating that he planned to end his life the following day because he couldn't live with what he'd done. No one really knows for sure if he was telling the truth. Many believed the story was fake because there was no evidence to back it up, and anyone can say anything on the internet, but it's not like the claims made in the story were that unbelievable. Interestingly, just 8 hours after Opie's final post, Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested. This probably had nothing to do with the 4chan post or the information that OP claimed to have sent to CNN and other media companies, but it is an interesting coincidence. You probably never heard of a Cole Romney, so you might assume that OP just made this guy up, but actually a man with this name does in fact exist, and is a second cousin twice removed of Mitt. I'm not sure if the other details known about this guy match up with what OP said. He is married with 2 children. He was a medical student, an officer in the US Air Force, and ran a business with his wife making mittens for children. So not exactly the type of person you'd expect to have been a crazy party guy at 22, who nonchalantly arranged for the disposal of a woman's body who OD'd in his presence, but you never know. It is worth noting that there was an article about Cole in October 2020, over 3 months after the 4chan post, but as far as I can tell, there was no information about him online prior to this. I guess it's a bit of a joke that house centipedes are at the bottom of this iceberg, but they are pretty terrifying. I don't remember ever seeing one until about 2 years ago when I was staying in an Airbnb for a few days and must have encountered about 10 of them, one of which crawled out of the drain when I was in the shower. It was a traumatizing event. Despite their jarring appearance, they aren't really a threat to humans. They can sting, but it's rare, since it's difficult for them to penetrate the skin and they don't often attempt to unless they're cornered or aggressively handled. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, plus any topics you might like me to cover in the future. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my Ko-fi members and channel members whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in a new video.